Adaora had a dream once. She was running. The wind kissed her cheeks, her arms stretched wide like wings, a small bird catching the morning breeze. The world in her dream was golden, soft beneath her feet. She laughed. She danced. She ran. Then she woke up. Her eyes fluttered open to the pale ceiling of their one-room home. The stillness returned. Her legs lay limp and bent at the knees, one foot curled inward, the other resting awkwardly. Just like always. Twisted. Weak. Not like the dream. She lay still, blinking back the tears that threatened to fall too easily these days. Her body was wrapped in a faded wrapper, the same one Mama used to call her princess cloth when she was younger. Now it barely warmed her against the chill of dawn. The mattress beneath her was thin, almost just foam in name. Covered with old Macintosh, fraying at the edges. On top of that, a cotton bedspread that had once been bright but now wore the tired look of overuse and too much sun. Then she felt it. The dampness. Not just her tears this time. Her diaper had run out yesterday. Mama had used some old rags from the kitchen to patch together a makeshift solution, but it hadn't helped much. The wetness soaked through again. The smell, faint but present, made her want to disappear. She curled inward slightly, facing the wall, her cheek pressed against the pillow now soaked not just with tears, but shame. The early morning light crept through the wooden slats of the window, painting soft golden stripes on the rough cement floor. Outside, a cock crowed. Someone's radio crackled to life, a gospel song playing, muffled by distance. Mama would be up by now. Out back, scrubbing customers' clothes in the large metal basin. Humming in that low, tired way she always did when the day began. Soon, she would call Adaora. And Adaora would have to rise, ashamed. She would roll off the wet mattress, dragging herself to the edge, hoping Mama wouldn't say anything today. But Mama always noticed. Always sighed. Always washed, both the cloth and the pain. Adaora closed her eyes again. Not to sleep. But to return to the dream. Where her legs were strong. Where she was flying. Where she wasn't, this. They said she should have been able to run. Or at least walk. If only she'd had surgery when she was a baby. If only they'd known early enough. If only they'd had the money. But money doesn't fall like rain. And for Adaora's mother, it came only in drops. Back then, when Adaora's legs first began to stiffen. When they started bending inwards like they were folding into themselves. The doctors said it was still possible to correct them. But possible doesn't mean affordable. There were diapers to buy. Food to cook. Rent to pay. And even then, not always enough to pay all three. Time passed. The bones grew wrong. The legs turned more. Hope faded into routine. They say she can still have surgery. Maybe. Maybe it will help. Maybe she'll stand straighter. Maybe not. But the surgery costs more now. And the money. It's still missing. Adaora has never run. Not once. Not ever. She was born with Spina Bifida, a word people barely understand but still judge quickly. And the world. The world was born with assumptions. And whispers. And pity wrapped in impatience. Her mother only found out after Adaora was born. One moment she held a new life in her arms, a baby with curious eyes and soft hair. The next, nurses were rushing her to another room. Words like spinal defect, exposed nerves, and immediate intervention filled the air. She didn't even have time to cry. They performed the first surgery on Adaora's back before she was even 6 weeks old. A kind foundation paid for it, a one-time mercy. Adaora's parents thought the worst was over. They were wrong. That surgery was only the beginning. There were complications. Frequent fevers. Infections. Fluid buildup in her head they called hydrocephalus. More hospital visits. More medications. More fear. When Adaora turned 3, her father left. He said he was going to look for work. He never came back. Not even when she was hospitalized again. Not for her birthday. Not once. Her mother waited for months. Then she stopped waiting. But she never stopped working. She used to be a tailor, a good one. Her shop was small but cheerful, with bright fabrics and customers who called her Madame Cece. But hospital appointments didn't wait for sewing clients. Emergencies came before fittings. When Adaora was 5, an infection nearly took her life. The hospital bill was too much. So Mama sold her sewing machine, her only real asset. One last zip, one last stitch, and it was gone. Since then, she's taken any job that paid. Washing clothes, scrubbing floors, cooking for people who sometimes didn't even pay on time. Anything to buy. Diapers, medications, antiseptic creams, clinic transport, rice, beans, bread for mornings Adaora could chew without nausea. And when none of those could be bought, she gave what money couldn't: her hands, her back, her sleep. Sometimes, Adaora wonders how one woman can be so strong and still so soft. In school, they didn't include her in the race. Not because she didn't want to run. Not because she wasn't trying hard in other things. But because she was different, and that difference made people uncomfortable. It had been hard enough just to get her into a school in the first place. Most of the schools Mama tried said no. Some said they didn't have ramps. Others said she would distract the other children. One principal even said, "We've never had someone like her here before. We don't have the facility." It was only when someone from the NGO supporting them stepped in and visited the school that they finally accepted her. But even that came with conditions. She must wear diapers at all times, the school head said. We can't have a smell around the other children. Not, we will make her feel welcome. Not, we'll help her adjust. Just, don't disturb the others. So Adaora wore the diapers. And silence. She kept to herself, even when she wanted to join in. She made sure the ruffles on her dress covered the top of the diaper, that her wheelchair was positioned far enough from others not to draw attention. She learned to hide. And when it was time for sports, she watched. From the corner of the schoolyard, beneath the mango tree, she would sit in her chair and watch the other children run. Their legs were fast, careless, noisy. They screamed and laughed. They fell and got back up without thinking. She loved that. She hated that. She wished, more than anything, that she could feel wind in her face like that, not just in dreams. But no one ever offered her a turn. No one asked if she wanted to play. Some smiled politely. Some ignored her. A few laughed behind her back. At church, it wasn't much different. The children were kind, but from a distance. They waved. They greeted. But rarely did they sit beside her on purpose. Maybe they felt sorry for her. Maybe they didn't know what to say. But Adaora knew pity when she saw it. And pity is not the same as friendship. In Sunday school, she sat in her corner near the door. Her wheelchair squeaked a little when she moved, so she tried not to move too much. During memory verse recitations and songs, she was always ready with the answers. But no one turned to her and said, "Be on our team." When it was time to play games or act Bible stories, the other children scattered into groups. Adaora watched as they ran about the room. She smiled when they laughed, quietly, carefully. But when the groups were made, she was often left out. Sometimes, a teacher would step in and say, "Include Adaora." And a child would sigh and shuffle toward her. Like it was a chore. Like kindness was a rule, not a choice. It was like they were afraid they could catch whatever she had. But Spina Bifida wasn't contagious. It wasn't in the air. It wasn't on her skin. It was inside her spine, curved, complicated, and part of her. Still, Adaora began to believe what their silence was telling her. That maybe she was a burden. That maybe she wasn't wanted. That maybe she didn't belong in the world that ran and danced and skipped around her. So she smiled smaller, spoke less, waited to be chosen, and expected not to be. And in her quiet, careful way, she began to disappear from the space around her, even as she remained in it. Her mother was a warrior in plain clothes. Not the kind who wore armor or carried a sword, but the kind whose hands were always doing something, scrubbing, stirring, lifting, wiping, praying. She worked 3 jobs: cleaner, cook, and in the midnight hours when the world was quiet, a prayer warrior. A mother whispering battles into the ear of God. They lived in a one-room house on the edge of the compound. No ceiling, just zinc roof and faded paint. The kitchen and toilet were outside, a shared pit latrine behind a crumbling block wall. But Adaora didn't use the pit latrine. She couldn't. It was too far, too dangerous, too exposed. Her mother worried about infections, about flies, about shame. So Adaora used a small plastic bucket in the corner of the room. Mama cleaned it out every morning before the sun rose. Her mother was strong. So strong that people often said, "I don't know how you do it." So strong that she never cried in front of Adaora. She laughed when she needed to. She danced when there was reason to celebrate. And when there wasn't, she simply hummed hymns softly and kept going. But there was one day Adaora saw her mother cry. It was the day the doctor said surgery might help. That if they could do it soon, maybe Adaora could stand straighter. Maybe even walk, with support. The doctor's voice was calm, professional. But when they stepped outside the hospital room, Mama's hands trembled. And then her shoulders. And then her whole body. Tears came suddenly, quietly. Adaora watched from her chair, unsure if she should speak. It was the first time she saw her mother's strength melt. That night, long after they returned home, Adaora lay awake on her thin mattress. The kerosene lantern had been turned out. Crickets sang in the bush beyond their window. Children were playing somewhere nearby, a game involving clapping and laughing under the moonlight. And Mama was praying. Adaora heard her, not loud, but clearly. She didn't ask God to make Adaora walk. She didn't beg for miracles. She said, "Lord, please help me take care of her. Give me strength. Give me money to buy what she needs. Help me to always be there." Adaora's eyes filled with tears. Not because of the pain in her legs, but because of the weight in her mother's heart. She remembered overhearing her mother tell someone one day at the clinic, "I don't mind carrying her forever. But if God says she will walk, let her walk." And that night, that very night, Adaora began to sing. Just softly, under her breath. A tune she made up herself. The words weren't clear. But the melody, it felt like flight. While other children chased shadows under the moon, she sang into the stillness. Musical notes her voice is found. The next Sunday at church, she sat near the back. The choir stood at the front, dressed in red and white robes, their voices rising into the rafters. Adaora listened. Then, almost without thinking, she began to sing quietly under her breath. No one noticed. Except one person. The choir director. A tall man with kind eyes who had seen many things, but perhaps never a girl singing like this. He paused mid-song. Tilted his head slightly. After the service, he approached her wheelchair. He bent down, not out of pity, but out of respect. "You know," he said, smiling gently, "your voice is more powerful than most feet." Adaora looked up, startled. Her lips trembled. And then she laughed, a small, shy laugh. The kind of laugh that hadn't lived on her face in a long time. After service that Sunday, the choir director came to find her again. His tone was light, but there was something serious in his eyes. "Adaora," he said, "we have Youth Sunday coming up in 2 weeks. I want you to sing." Her eyes widened, then dropped to her hands folded tightly in her lap. "Me? No. I can't." Her voice was barely a whisper. "You can," he replied. "I've heard you. Your voice carries something that others need to hear." She didn't respond. She shook her head once. Then paused, nodded slowly. Then shook her head again. Her heart and fear were at war. As the day drew closer, Adaora almost convinced herself to back out. Her nerves buzzed. What if she forgot the lyrics? What if her voice cracked? What if they laughed? But Mama had already picked out her best wrapper. The one she wore only on Christmas Day or special occasions. She tied it with pride that morning and helped Adaora into her dress, yellow with tiny white flowers. "Shine today," Mama said softly, adjusting the scarf around Adaora's hair. "And when God opens a door," she smiled. "Don't worry if there are no steps. We'll carry you through." The church was full that morning. Rows and rows of people, parents, children, visitors. The walls buzzed with chatter and anticipation. Adaora sat quietly near the front, hands shaking slightly on her lap, her wheels locked in place. Her heart beat fast. Her mouth felt dry. She stared at the microphone stand they had wheeled to her spot. It looked tall, heavy, like it belonged to someone stronger. And when the choir director called her name, everything inside her wanted to disappear. The room stilled. A few murmurs. Some turned their heads in curiosity. Slowly, a church worker rolled the microphone to her level and adjusted it gently. "Take your time," he whispered. She looked out across the congregation, the sea of eyes, the blur of colors, the expectations. Her chest tightened. Her voice felt stuck. Then she closed her eyes. And she sang. It wasn't loud. It didn't echo like the big-voiced sisters in the choir. But it was steady. And full. Full of years of silence. Full of tears no one saw. Full of locked-up dreams that had finally found a door. The room changed. Not all at once. But in waves. The woman who usually dozed off halfway through service sat up, alert, hands clasped. The boy who mocked her at school last week leaned forward and whispered, "Wow." Even the pastor reached for his handkerchief, dabbing at tears behind the pulpit. Adaora didn't see all that. She just sang. Eyes still closed. Hands still trembling. But heart wide open. When it ended, there was silence. Then slow clapping. Then more. Then a standing ovation, the kind that started in the hearts of people who had been changed. After the service, people came forward, not out of curiosity, but out of gratitude. A woman with tired eyes and a scarf tied too tightly whispered, "My daughter is like you. She hasn't spoken in weeks. Today, she smiled." Another woman clutched Adaora's mother's hand, crying as she spoke. "I came to church today planning to end my life. But when your daughter sang, something broke in me. I'll wait. Maybe there's still music for me too." Adaora just sat quietly, tears filling her eyes. She hadn't moved. But something inside her had. That was the day her voice ran farther than her legs ever could. Several weeks after that Sunday, a knock came at the door. It was early. The morning sun hadn't fully risen, but the compound was already waking. Pots clanging, water fetching, chickens scratching at the earth. Mama opened the door, her wrapper tied hurriedly, her hands still smelling faintly of soap from washing. A man stood there. Well-dressed. Soft-spoken. He carried no Bible, no offering bag, no goods to sell. "Good morning, Ma," he said with a respectful nod. "I'm looking for Adaora's mother." Mama hesitated, eyes narrowing. "Yes. I'm her mother." The man smiled, gently. "Someone shared Adaora's singing online. Our organization saw it. Heard it. And we want to help." He handed over a small envelope, inside, a letter. And a message. "Your voice ran farther than your legs ever could." No name. No identity. Just that single, powerful sentence. And a signature from an international medical charity. Mama stood frozen. She read the letter twice. Then again. And then, she sat down quietly on the doorstep, hands shaking, tears rolling without shame. Adaora watched her from inside, unsure whether to hope or to fear. But her mother turned to her with a trembling smile. "It's happening," she whispered. "Baby, it's really happening." The surgery came. Long hours. Multiple procedures. Recovery was slow. Painful. Some days Adaora wanted to scream. But she didn't. She sang instead. And in time, she stood. Not the way others stood, tall, steady, carefree. But she stood. With crutches at first. Then with braces. Sometimes wobbling, sometimes still needing her chair. But she could move through space in a way she never had before. The first time she stood fully and took a step, the whole ward clapped. Not because she was healed, but because she was becoming. And when she stood, she sang louder. Now, Adaora teaches other children with disabilities how to sing. How to use the voice inside them even when their bodies won't move the way they wish. She tells them, "You may be sitting, but your story can stand tall." She tells them, "You don't need to run to reach hearts. Your sound, your voice, your words, they will go farther than your feet ever could." Her name is Adaora. She never ran. Not in races. Not with the other children. But her voice. It still runs. All the way. Into hearts. Into homes. Into places her legs may never reach. And that is her miracle. A miracle that did not begin in heaven. But in pain. In stillness. In a girl who closed her eyes and dared to sing.